Welcome to The Explainer. We're jumping right into a totally fascinating moment in time today, where the data we're seeing on paper is completely contradicting how things are actually playing out in the real world. So picture this. What happens when a booming job market collides head-on with Wall Street panic and some massive shakeups in Washington? It's kind of the central paradox of the week. We're going to break down exactly how good news for everyday folks on Main Street is actually creating shockwaves literally everywhere else. It's a domino effect that's touching everything from your grocery bill and retirement account all the way up to the highest levels of government. Here is our roadmap for today. We're looking at markets diving as jobs rise, the massive SpaceX IPO liftoff, a huge Washington intelligence shakeup, and finally, how new food policies are hitting major resistance. Section 1, Markets Dive as Jobs Rise. We have got a massive disconnect on our hands right now. Over on Main Street, the U.S. economy just added a super robust 172,000 jobs in May. That completely blew past everyone's expectations, and it's the third straight month of really solid payroll gains. But over on Wall Street, they absolutely hated the news. The tech-heavy NASDAQ suffered a 4.2% drop. That is its worst decline since the tariff rout back in April of 2025. We're talking over $1 trillion in market value just erased from the semiconductor index alone. So why the panic? Well, Wall Street is dealing with a perfect storm of anxieties. First off, investors are terrified that those massive AI investments, literally trillions poured into chips and infrastructure, just aren't going to yield the blockbuster returns everyone was banking on. And when you combine that doubt with a really strong job market, it triggers two other massive fears: persistent inflation and the dread that the Federal Reserve is going to be forced to raise interest rates just to cool the economy back down. And here is the stark reality driving all that fear. 3.4%. That is how much year-over-year average hourly earnings rose. Now, that sounds great for workers' wallets, right? But it is giving the brand new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, a massive headache. The guy has only been on the job for 2 weeks, and he is already in the hot seat. He came in expecting to cut rates, but this 3.4% wage growth means he has to seriously weigh fighting inflation against keeping the whole economy growing. The bond market is actually betting on a rate increase by year-end now. Moving on to Section 2, the SpaceX IPO liftoff. While the rest of the tech world is sweating, Elon Musk's SpaceX is gearing up for a massive June 12th IPO with an absolutely astronomical valuation of $1.77 trillion. They're pricing in at $135 a share. This is a company aiming to literally colonize Mars, and investors are lining up around the block, completely brushing off the broader tech sell-off we just talked about. But the coolest part of this story isn't just the big numbers, it's the human element. Behind that massive $1.77 trillion valuation are everyday workers who took a risk early on. Take former SpaceX welder Juan Hernandez. He started out as a contractor making $28 an hour, and he took equity when it was valued at practically nothing. Today, his remaining early shares are worth nearly $880,000. This early corporate equity is turning into life-changing generational wealth for ordinary employees. Juan Hernandez used his early sell-offs to build a whole real estate business down in Texas. Former engineer J. Andre Lavoie left the company years ago, but his stake is now valued at over $28 million. He actually bought and is renovating a hotel in northern Italy right now. And mariner Marilyn Musselman, who literally retrieved rocket parts out of the ocean, plans to use her equity to start her own repair business. It's just a fascinating contrast to all those heavy macroeconomic fears of inflation and rate hikes we were looking at earlier. All right, Section 3, Washington Intelligence Shakeup. Let's pivot over to D.C., where a massive administrative shakeup is unfolding. President Trump has directed his incoming acting director of national intelligence, Bill Polt, to significantly slash agency staff. The administration is looking to make sweeping changes right out of the gate, and they've chosen an acting director who bypassed the traditional Senate confirmation process so they can get this moving quickly. To really wrap your head around the scale of this disruption, you have to look at the scope of the ODNI. This office oversees a massive $100 billion annual budget and 18 different intelligence agencies. And what's really wild is that this agency has already seen staff cuts of nearly 50% under former director Tulsi Gabbard. So this new mandate is aiming to cut an organization that has already been fundamentally downsized. We are seeing two fiercely competing perspectives on this. The administration's argument is that acting DNI Polte will be less shackled, giving him the agility to cut what they view as bloated, unnecessary bureaucracy before a permanent director even arrives. But on the flip side, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle are expressing deep concern over the potential weaponization and politicization of intelligence. And this isn't just theoretical debate. It is actively complicating the immediate reauthorization of Section 702, which is a really crucial foreign surveillance power that's set to expire. And finally, Section 4, Food Policy Hits Resistance. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is pushing a totally sweeping public health initiative called Make America Healthy Again, or MAHA. The goal here is incredibly ambitious: strictly regulate ultra-processed foods, get rid of artificial dyes, and fundamentally change how Americans eat. But that brings us to a huge question. Why is such a seemingly positive push for healthier food facing so much severe pushback? And the crazy thing is, it's not just taking fire from the massive food industry, it's actually facing deep resistance from within the White House itself. It all comes down to the economy. Grocery prices are already up a staggering 26% over the last 5 years alone. So there's this massive tension between wanting healthier food and the harsh reality of just keeping that food affordable. White House officials are super sensitive to affordability right now. They're afraid that any new regulations will drive up prices even more, which could be a huge issue for voters heading into the midterm elections. Meanwhile, you've got MHA-backed bills moving through state houses, creating this super complex web of new local rules. The food industry's response to all this is pretty blunt. Rhonda Bentz and a coalition of major food companies are arguing that a patchwork of strict new state laws, like the ones passed in Louisiana, Texas, and West Virginia, just creates a costly regulatory nightmare. In fact, they're pointing to a study showing that these state-level bans and labeling requirements could actually bump your annual grocery spending up by 12%. They're pushing for a single national standard, making the point that working families simply can't afford a luxury-priced everyday groceries.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought to wrap up today's explainer. We've looked at the Fed battling strong jobs, SpaceX totally defying tech gravity, the sweeping intelligence cuts, and the major push for healthier food. But as inflation keeps biting and markets wobble, will these soaring technological and political ambitions ultimately be grounded by the heavy weight of everyday costs? Think about how these massive macro forces are showing up in your own daily life. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time on The Explainer.